So the initial vision for Taloflow was to build low-code, no-code integrations using
Okay.
uh, some element of natural language to help people build them so that they wouldn't have to code everything. They have to make a decision very fast. They had never made a decision that fast before within the organization. And we enabled them to get their recommendation actually did bear out the fruits that we were expecting. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You are with me in an exclusive interview series where we talk with AI innovators like you, talk about the experiences, challenges, and achievements in the AI field. We'll start with your background, the vision behind Taloflow, and what actually makes it the perfect in the market, and we'll discuss the technology behind it and everything around it. So let's get started.
I have quite a bit of experience in the AI industry. I founded a company back in 2014 called Weave Wearables. We were using computer vision to understand feet and how we could create custom orthotics for them. So we had computer vision on the phone running and a lot of labeling work, a lot of data, and eventually we're able to detect various types of differences in feet and be able to prescribe or produce the right pair of orthotics to help with biomechanical support based off of that. With Taloflow, Taloflow has gone through several pivots. There has always been an element of AI in it. Of course, what AI is sort of changes. Back when we were first started, it was really more about natural language understanding because we were building low code and no code integrations.
I see.
And then we pivoted to cloud cost management. And then the use of AI was much more important in terms of predicting future cloud spend and the likelihood of optimizations working out using our platform. And then now, I guess the type of AI we're leveraging more so is, of course, RAG, LLM, so that we can, and generative AI, just generally speaking, so that we can create categories in various areas of software, cloud, and other types of tooling, uh, and curate categories that would help people make better decisions to find the right fit for them without having to do a bunch of desk research. So the initial vision for Taloflow was to build low-code, no-code integrations using
Okay.
uh, some element of natural language to help people build them so that they wouldn't have to code everything. And we really focused on integrations in the e-commerce space, so things like Sin7 and Shopify and so on. We then pivoted that business towards cloud cost management. The
Right.
cloud cost management business also leveraged AI in some way in terms of building predictive models for forecasting cloud spend. And
Mhm.
then eventually we got to where we are today, which is we pivoted towards helping buyers pick the right vendors for their technology stack. And initially, that was not really an AI play. It was more of an expert systems play. But once LLMs came into the fray, we realized that we could really leverage that technology to reduce the reliance we had on analysts to scale up our product on our platform and even make them and even augment them so that they can curate more categories, by analyst. And so that's going to allow us to go from, just a few categories to potentially hundreds in the next year because technology does automate a lot of the desk research we used to do, and allows us to recommend tools in many more categories. Yeah, so the logo and the name has been with us through all these pivots. So the relevance to the exact idea we're working on today, I'm not sure it's there. However, it's versatile, so we like it. Talo was shorthand for Talos, which is the automaton that used to patrol Crete in Greek mythology. So one of the first robots built, so around automation. And Flow is just a lending some a bit of a hint that we're all about the workflow. So
I see.
luckily, what we're doing today is um, plays into that quite well. We're automating some aspect of the workflow. In other
All right.
words, the workflow
Yes.
related to procuring software. Yes. In our latest pivot, what we did is We took the customers we had from our prior pivot, which was an audience of about 70 CTOs and heads of engineering, and really asked open-ended questions about what problems they were encountering day in and day out or on a regular basis. And what kept surfacing as an answer is that choosing the right technologies for the stack is high
Mhm.
risk, laborious, and I don't really want to keep assigning 2, 3 engineers to each of these individual projects all the time when they could be shipping code. So if someone could solve that, that would be great, because I'm not going to make decisions off G2 reviews. Who does that? And I'm not going to be making decisions off Gartner Magic Quadrants. It's not relevant to my specific use case. So there was a lot of skepticism as to the resources out there on behalf of developers, so they always do their own research and testing. And so we started with that niche, the developer tools niche, to find ways to really shorten the time it would take for them to research the available products and identify the right one for them once they identify a need. Of course. So the main objective is to drastically reduce the amount of time it takes to curate relevant insights to your specific use case. So today, if you're going to do that without Taloflow, you're going to go do a bunch of research and
Hours and
Googling.
days.
You're going to create spreadsheets. And then you're going to, if you're an enterprise of any decent size, you then have to manage all these stakeholder expectations and figure out what are our requirements, what should be our requirements. Some people don't even know where to start because they're not experts in the categories they're buying. So they might be, well, I need an iPass. I really don't know what I should care about. Someone help me. So then they rely heavily on consultants and outsource that work as well. So I do think that the vision for Taleflow does kind of factor into this as well, which is what can we do to help consultants serve more customers at scale or provide faster turnaround for their services when it comes to, like, can we reduce desk research across the board, whether it's an enterprise or at a consulting firm? Can we reduce desk research? And then can we transparently provide insights that are relevant to the specific use cases at hand? So they have different models. So G2 is, of course, a very useful tool for understanding, okay, well, does something kind of pass my minimal threshold of quality through their rating systems, right? And they've done a great job collecting lots of reviews. However, the onus is still on you to sift through those reviews, pull out what's relevant to you, and the level of criteria that, let's say, a G2 will tackle in terms of exposing what a software does and how well it does. It gives you some high-level information, lay of the land. I almost see G2 as more of a discovery tool. It's a better Google, right, for buying
Yeah.
software. However, when it comes to selection, which is to go from here's the lay of the land, here are all the vendors you should consider, to which are my top 1 or 2 I'm going to run a RFP process with or POC with, that's where Tailful comes in. And that's where we have a bit of a head-to-head with Gartner in some cases. Gartner, in some ways, is a bit of a discovery tool because of its Magic Quadrant product. However, it has this service, which is the inquiries, where analysts will hop on 30-minute calls, typically, with software buyers to provide advice on what they should buy. However, it's a manual human scale process. So a typical analyst at Gartner has, I think, 500 to 800 calls a year they have to handle. They can only spend 30 minutes with the customer, and they're so overwhelmed that it sometimes can take months to get a call booked if you're a buyer, by which time you should probably make your decision. So I think Gartner is in many ways the model, but what Tailflow is doing is bringing automation, AI, and heavily curated data sets that are transparent to the user to the market. So we're reshaping the market. We're recreating Gartner as if it were being founded today, in many ways. So from customers, our inputs that they provide us is practically just what is the prioritization they want on certain requirements, features, and weights they want on dimensions. So when we take those inputs from customers, where the expert system is then able to transparently recommend the tools that they should look into and provides explanations for them, for why they should go with tool X, Y, or Z. And that's really the inputs we gather from the customers. The customers, however, do have a collaborative notebook experience within Taloflow. So there is a lot of, cool tooling around real-time collaboration with your coworkers to actually get stakeholder inputs as well. So that's as far as it goes in terms of inputs. The users, however, one thing I want to point out, when they do change requirement priorities and features priorities and dimension weights, that goes into our system and improves our models so we can create more baselines for different use cases. So when the next customer actually goes in and creates a use case, we can actually pull in that data from prior use cases and use it to get them to where they need to be faster. Another thing I should add is Taloflow's curation of data is not always comprehensive. We tend to get maybe 98, 99% of the features you should be considering, but once in a while, our customers add a few features to an evaluation that we didn't consider. But of course, that then bakes into future evaluations and serves the next customers as well. So in some ways, we have a bit of a network effect here where there is more incremental utility to the tool, the more usage we have, because there's this feedback loop where users are providing new information that might not be readily available on the web or through our experts and analysts. For example, there might be a very obscure integration that a service has to provide for it to be valid for a use case, which might have been deprecated recently or like within the last day. Maybe we picked up on it, but our users sometimes do pick up on that stuff, and that factors into our data set thereafter. When you're at a large enough enterprise, you're very concerned about how your colleagues perceive you and how your leadership perceives you. And you do not want to suggest that your leadership makes a bad decision, right? And you actually want to look like you're very informed in the decisions you're making, that you've been transparent about every detail and consideration. So cover your assets as tongue-in-cheek, cover your ass. Like, how do you actually get to the required documentation where you're comfortable sharing it with leadership and saying, look, I've looked at everything here. You make the decision what I've given you, but I haven't missed anything. So in terms of what that means in the product, we have, I think one of the most important features in that realm is impact analysis. So we're able to show our users how each individual priority that they assign to a requirement or feature or weight to a dimension impacts the relative ranking between two vendors. So for example, if you prioritize role-based access control as a critical feature, and you have two vendors, Azure and AWS, and Azure scores better than AWS on that feature, then we will actually show you the point or score or ranking impact that prioritization had on the overall results or the relative ranking between those two vendors as well. So that's an element of how cover your assets would work with Taloflow. Another thing you asked is the requirements gathering, right? So requirements gathering is a laborious process. It requires you to understand the space you're in, talk to a lot of vendors, and of course, identify the needs internally. And it's an iterative process with a lot of back and forth. So what we do is through questionnaires, we're able to dynamically generate those requirements tables for you and prioritize them accordingly so that you don't actually have to do all this work. And then you can actually go back to your team with something close to finished and say, look, I've identified our needs because I've gone through this questionnaire that's in theory asking the right questions about what I should be looking at, and it's like talking to a consultant, and this automated consultant in a way put together this table for us. What do you guys think? Sometimes there's some tweaking involved, but the beauty of Taloflow is that with every change you make in the document or to your underlying assumptions, the overall results will change. So if you prioritize that RBAC feature I mentioned earlier from a critical feature to a nice to have, the report will immediately change and show you different rankings, results, and explanations. So you have this iterative way of building this document with the cover your assets component and the requirements generation that really isn't available anywhere else.
So it means
when you're making a big enough decision, switching costs are important to consider. Risk is important to consider. You're not going to migrate from one iPaaS provider to another and, like I said, rely on some review site or on one, some word of mouth or whatever it is, right? They're useful inputs, but those decisions require a lot of rigor to be made. These are multi-million-dollar decisions sometimes, and even when you're talking about the tens of thousands, the impact of a bad decision is high. So you need to have some great element of rigor around these processes in most companies. I'd say the exception is some very, very early stage startups. They move so fast and there's not enough complexity in their systems yet where maybe they can pick a tool for their stack, and if it doesn't work, switch it out and try something else. And if that doesn't work, switch it out and try something else. But that's just not the way things work progressively as you get to bigger and bigger companies. So that's why you need tailored insights for a use case. You can't just buy things and then get rid of them. You need to make that first buy decision with a lot of confidence. Underlying all this is a curated data set for each category we have. If you can imagine, it's like a matrix of vendor features mapped to each vendor, and then a scoring for each that we generate. But it's transparent to the user. But then what the user can do is prioritize those features, and then they can see them bubble up into requirements. So features are like the atomic components of the evaluations. Those bubble up into the requirements and the dimensions. And then you can see how each vendor scores for each dimension and each requirement. And so that's the core is the data, but then it's the user priorities are the inputs for the expert system to then recommend the right tools. And then the recommendations themselves aren't just a ranking. It actually does provide thorough explanations saying like, well, Azure beat AWS on role-based access control or on pricing, and for these specific reasons. However, AWS should also be considered because it has very good integration with, this, tool, and or is its API for this is better, or it has more redundancy. Like there's always explanations as if you were talking to an analyst that understands all the nuance. So that's how we take, again, like I said, we have our underlying data sets, but then the priorities, and then the expert systems and the AI are able to then write very good summaries that provide detail and insight into the nuance of every decision. It's addressed to both. We did initially start building this product with a technical audience in mind. So what that resulted in is, well, we know developers are very skeptical, so we're going to make sure there's a lot of detail in everything we do. So we built a very detailed product. As far as it comes to other line of business users who are not technical, this is also very accessible to them. This is very much a horizontal platform. It applies to people making decisions in the CRM space, ERP space, iPaaS space, APM and observability space, CI/CD tool space. And even like, at some point, picking the right foundational LLM model. So there's all these categories that go across the board. We are really this full service platform, and no matter your role in the organization, and that'll be more and more the case as we drastically increase the number of categories we support. We use the best security practices out there, where we're actually working on our SOC 2 Type 2 at this time as well. So I have been going through that rigorous process. The other thing I would say is built into Taloflow is a very robust permissioning suite. And so when it comes to role-based access control, we have that up the wazoo, able to finely tune who has access to what documents, who can edit, who can view, who can share, what workspaces are, what organizations are. Like it is very much enterprise ready from that point of view. And so the permissioning is I think of in a very strong place right now. What I want to emphasize relates to speed, right? We had a mid-market customer come to us looking to make a pretty expensive decision in a very short time frame. They had 2 to 3 weeks before a important deal expired, and so they had to make a decision very fast. They had never made a decision that fast before within the organization, and we enabled them to get there fast, and they're now 6 months later still very satisfied with the decision. So proof is in the pudding that Taloflow helped them accelerate the pace of decision making so they can meet their deadlines. We provide all the rigor so that they can present to leadership and sign off quickly. And then finally, the recommendation actually did bear out the fruits that we were expecting. There are many other examples. I would say there's been circumstances where the tool has helped people identify that a need they had was not really a need that they should be considering. And so it helped them avoid silly projects altogether. We've had many circumstances where companies have come to us where there's already a decision made within the org, but someone in the org is a bit skeptical as to whether it's the right decision. They use Taloflow just at the right time to produce a report and say like, hey, well, before we go with this vendor, look at this. Like, I think we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot. And that completely changed the tone around the decision, and they reconsidered everything and ended up going with a different vendor. So it's interesting where like the ability of Taloflow to provide just in time, or like, in a few minutes, provide insights that can be valuable to a decision, means that we can be injected at any point. People don't have to use Taloflow at the very start of their process or when they're at the high level trying to understand what the landscape is. If even at the last minute, if you need a gut check or want a quick call, Taloflow is that it enables that, if you will. Number one challenge we have is the minimal amount of categories present on the platform. Today we have 16 categories.
Yeah.
Practically every customer we've had has had a very positive experience with Taloflow. Now the only issue is they're like, well, I have another decision to make. You helped me with this one earlier. Can you help me with this?
All right.
And we're like, well, we don't support that category yet, unfortunately, but it's on the roadmap. And this is where AI comes in. We have been working diligently on using LLMs to scale our research. So we expect to grow from 16 to many hundreds of categories this year, so that is no longer an issue. And that's going to help Taloflow be more sticky, have higher ACV, higher satisfaction across the board. Because the pain point that every customer of ours has is, thank you for helping me buy our CRM. I need to buy, now I need to buy a test coverage tool, or I need to buy a ERP system specifically for the airlines industry. Everyone has a niche category that might sound completely random, but makes sense. And so Taloflow is going to be in a position to support each one of those niches soon enough. I think this is such a great application for AI and LLMs, if you think about it, right? There's plenty of data online on what tools do, what bloggers think about it, what review sites think about it, what change logs, news releases. Like, there's so much data online for it, and it's very expensive work where you typically hire McKinsey to do desk research, or a Gartner to like hop on a call with you and you pay their license. Like, it's a very expensive problem that can be readily solved with the available LLM technology. So I just think that this is a space that we're going to see being disrupted across the board, is the space of the broader research problem. It might not just be for technology selection, but technology selection is a very good use case for research AI to disrupt. I just want to put one caveat out there, that it's not the whole problem. We have a lot of learnings at Taloflow on what it takes to build a collaborative notebook that gets your technology selection, done very fast and with a lot of rigor. And I would say the LLM piece is a very important piece of it, but I would put equal weight on real-time collaboration, on expert systems, on having an expert network, which we do have, because at the end of the day, Taloflow will not do anything without an expert in the loop. So that's like what we provide to our users, that, hey, the assurance is a human with expertise in this category has looked at this. So we might have used it to like accelerate the ability for us to deliver this category to you, but someone has looked at this. And that's also a very important component of our strategy. So it's multi-pronged. Well, I think it's not going to be so disruptive in the enterprise in terms of roles, because procurement departments are already overwhelmed. If they can get tools that can help them accelerate their work or serve more internal customers, then that's great. So I don't think we're a labor replacement there at all. I think we really are going to be powering procurement departments, which are already understaffed. In terms of like the individual roles, so any director or manager at an org tends to buy Taloflow. It could be someone in the marketing department, the engineering department, or so on. I think in those roles where we serve a greater purpose is, maybe instead of outsourcing a decision, they will be able to do it internally thanks to us, and therefore maybe understand the weight of the decision they're making and the inputs, and and the outcomes a little more than if they had done it with a consultant. So I think that's where we might be a bit disruptive as well. Really, our focus at Taloflow is Gartner, and what can we do to reinvent and reimagine what the role they play in today's market. So, on my prior point on the consultants, like I just want to say, like, I do see Taloflow as a huge enabler to consultants so they can serve their enterprise customers at scale. Don't necessarily look at replacing them. So we're not really replacing anyone or disrupting anyone with the enterprise. Uh, at least as far as I can see now, we're more of an augmentation. But when it comes to Gartner, I do see that we can really shake things up there. So technology is always changing, and that's another reason why I think we need a new platform, right? That actually
Yeah.
stays on top of all this stuff. And we have a SLA where we do commit that we do commit to refresh each category within 30 days. There are cases where that's not enough. There are cases where like the velocity of feature changes and so on is so fast within a category that a week's difference is enough to like completely change things. But
Yeah.
that's fairly rare, and we're working to shorten, of course, from 30 days down to 2 weeks when we can eventually real time, like we'll pick up on everything. But that's where we are today, and I don't think many out there can have that level of commitment. If you think about it, back to Gartner, their cycle for releasing Magic Quadrants is, much longer than that. I think yearly. So
Yeah.
a lot can happen within a year. So when a company or a large enterprise has to do a vendor evaluation internally, the process typically goes like this. They first have to assess the needs, right? So what do we need? And then they will then go and investigate who can meet that need. And somewhere in that cycle, they then start working on identifying requirements. Then they start prioritizing requirements. Then they go and assess vendor capabilities. And then they document all this. And of course, they have to manage stakeholders throughout this process. Now, the really frustrating part for the manual version of this process, aka the non-Taloflow version, is that each step might trigger you revisiting a prior step. So it's done iteratively. So can you imagine you get all the way to the end, you've created a document, and then an executive that's reviewing the leadership document is like,
Yeah.
well, I don't really agree with this set of vendors. Go get rid of these three and add these two in. And then, oh yeah, and these requirements make no sense. So then you go back to the drawing board and back again. And that's why sometimes these decisions take many quarters or a year or two, right? And
True.
it's very, very time consuming and political. So with Taloflow, it's done iteratively and dynamically. Like every change to your assumptions you make, boom, you can see the result in the final document. It's a new way of thinking about things. It's not waterfall, it's extremely agile. So our analytics suite, well, I think I'm going to just focus specifically on the visualizations. So we do provide some analytics on the decisions where you can see, well, of the dimensions which had a lot of weight, which didn't, of the requirements which had a lot of weight or which didn't. So we kind of show you for your decision, like what were the levers you pulled that had a great outcome or a small outcome on the overall results. That's the level of analytics we provide. Well, I've Taloflow's a second venture-backed company I'm building, so I'm excited about that. So I
Right.
do have some experience. I've won some awards, of course. But I would say some things I'm really proud of is with my 3D printed orthotics business, you know, the team and I behind that did something quite novel, which is we built the most popular consumer application of 3D printing ever, still today. And I think that's great. We kind of made, something that people really love.
All right.
And then with Taloflow, I'm really proud that we've gone through so many pivots and delivered really good value to each of our customers along the way. But we really believe in this latest one, and we have super high conviction in transforming technology vendor selection. This is more general than just AI.
All right.
I would really advise entrepreneurs to understand what they're getting into, that like their first idea might not reach product market fit, that they might have to iterate a long time. And so to really get mentally ready that starting a venture, whether it's AI or something else, is a 10-year commitment. Um, and if you look at some of the long cycles to get the product market fit, like Figma being one of the longest, for example, you can still build tremendous value, but it takes a long time to get there. And sometimes, you're just one hack away from
Right.
breaking through. But you have to be in it for the long haul. AI does benefit entrepreneurs in many ways because we're now in a cycle where a lot of the incumbents can be disrupted. So there's many more opportunities available for you to build software and more, and capture a lot of value in pre-existing markets. Things can be entirely redefined. So I would just say it's a gold rush, but the same rules apply. There are downsides to gold rushes too, right? There's more competition. There's more competition for VC dollars. There's more competition for customers in gold rushes.
Yeah.
So be mindful of that. You have to make a long-term commitment. Well, they can't literally replace humans, but they can definitely replace
Okay.
a lot of the work we do. Um, but I think it'll be some time. Uh, having been a student of Gartner's history, I'm also a student of Gartner's hype cycles, right? And
Yeah.
it's very interesting to see like how like 10 years ago we thought all these things would happen, but it takes a little longer than we expect, and maybe it's the second time around that things really do happen. You know, AI was having a big moment around 2016, 2017 with NLU and NLP. And we thought that was going to be the big breakthrough. And there was a ton of money going into that stuff back then too. And now we're having the second wave and it feels a lot more real. But Gen AI is just one aspect of, I guess, maybe the race to AGI. I am very fascinated by companies building embodied AI, where they're building robots because they have an understanding that you need these large behavioral models to really understand the world humans work in and to have a
Right.
better affinity uh, uh, for our level of understanding of the world. So I think maybe we need new technologies and new platforms before replacement of humans in most facets of life is possible.
Anyway, thank you so much for your time. We look forward to hearing your insights and learning more about Taloflow. Thank you. Well said. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thank you. Great. Bye.